Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of the programme here at Health Careers Live. Hello, my name is Carrie Biddle. I am a speech and language therapist by profession. My pronouns are she and her, and I will be our panel chair this morning on the AHP leadership session. So I'm delighted to be joined by some incredible leaders from the AHP world. So I'm going to just go around and do a few introductions, and then we will get on with some questions and answers. If you've got any questions or thoughts you'd like to share with us, you can use the Q&A or you can pop it in the chat. We are here to interact with you this morning as well. So Vicky, I'm going to come to you first. Could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you're up to?
So I'm Vicky Hain. I'm a recently qualified ODP, or I suppose a year and a half qualified ODP now. I qualified just as we went into the first lockdown and started in trauma and orthopaedic theatre straight away. And throughout the pandemic, I've been sort of mixed between trauma and orthopaedic theatres and working in crit care, as obviously people are still breaking their bones as we're going through. And I've been introduced to this and all these different events through the student leadership programme. So I did that in my final year at university and then have carried on doing bits and pieces, followed on from that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Vicky. It's great to have you with us this morning. Efua, I'll come to you next.
My name's Efua Hagan. I'm also an ODP. I've been a bit too long now. It's been 12 years and I'm just about, well, hopefully, crossing fingers because I've been off sick for a while. So hopefully from tomorrow, I'm also going to be the workforce lead for the trust that I'm in. So I'm going to be the first ever non-nurse to be doing that role. So it's a huge achievement to have an AHP going into a role that is traditionally kind of covered with nursing as well. I have been like Vicky with the redeployment, been in theatres, also ITU, HD, and went to work on the wards and other areas as well. So a lot of people forget that theatres were still running with the pandemic and we were all kind of ferried out to so many different areas, and we're just hopefully going to be settling down a bit more as well. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. It's great to have ODP in force this morning on our leadership panel. And Luke, I'll come to you next.
Everyone, hello, my name is Luke Cunningham. I am professional lead for dietetics in Cornwall. I also work clinically as a dietitian on the critical care unit at the Royal Cornwall Hospital. I have been a dietitian for about 10 years now. I started my career in a big tertiary hospital back up north. Some of you may have heard of that. And I made the move to Cornwall about 3 years ago. I've worked mostly in adult gastroenterology and surgery patients, and obviously now in critical care. And I've been a professional lead for about 2 years now. And I'm loving life in the split role.
Lovely. Thanks ever so much, Luke, for your introduction. So I've got some questions here that I'm going to ask to you. But like I say, if anybody who's joining us this morning has got any questions they want to put to the panel, please do pop them in the chat box for us. So Vicky, I'm going to come to you first. What do you look for in a good leader? And can you share a bit more with us about the Council of Deans 150 leadership programme that you mentioned in your introduction?
Yes, definitely. So what do I look for in a leader? I think I change as I've sort of developed through my life. And I've previously come from the army, so I was 17 years an army officer. So it's obviously a slightly different leadership environment. And I think within the NHS, the strong leaders that I see within the NHS are the ones that really care for their employees and their employees' development. I think everyone that works in the NHS is absolutely patient focused, and I don't think the leaders need to drive their employees to be more patient focused because that's their natural default setting. I think people within the NHS are more likely to care less for their own development, their own career and their own well-being. And that's what I think the role of the leader within the NHS is. And so I think the best ones that I've seen as I've gone around as a student, as I've been a sort of newly qualified entering into the workforce, are those that take their individuals and develop career development plans for them, because I think it's very easy in the NHS to go, you might have a 30, 40, 50-year career in the NHS, and it's very easy to let 5 years go by and never actually have done anything to develop yourself. And suddenly we've got some very skilled, some very brilliant people that have not been developed, and they've got themselves into a rut, and it's very hard to get them out of them. And that, to me, is the point of that's what a good leader will do. And by doing that, they'll develop, people will move through their department. They may lose people to other areas, but they're going to get the good quality people coming in, because people see that unit as somewhere that you can go and that you're going to have a great career from. So I think that's the sort of key things that I like to see in the NHS leadership environment at the hospital level. Obviously, that may differ in your arm's length bodies and stuff, but at the moment, that's what I'm seeing. Leadership development. Didn't come into it thinking that I was going to go into leadership. I came into it saying I want to be a clinical ODP. But I think having had sort of 17 years of very practical, hands-on leadership experience through, in all sorts of environments, with all sorts of people working for me, I'm naturally just interested in how things are different within the NHS. And I found out about the student leadership programme towards the back end of my second year. I was like, that looks really good. So I applied for that, and it is absolutely fantastic. I think the university is brilliant at talking about leadership, but it's so far away for so many people within the university course that it doesn't actually sort of ring true. And obviously within that course, you've got people who have got no leadership experience, who are just out of university, who do want a few years to just sort of settle into the work life before they start going leadership. So you've got that sort of huge variety. And what the leadership programme allows is those people that have maybe got a little bit of spare capacity within their learning to go out and explore the wider NHS. During the year on the programme, we were all given opportunities to go and sit on. So, for example, I sat with the NHS Improvement on the People Plan, so on their working group for that. So I went to London to do that for a few times, which was just really interesting to see the people that come together and how that's developed. And obviously it's been introduced in the last year. I'm like, oh my God, I remember that conversation. And then also working with HEE. I mean, the HEE AHP team are absolutely phenomenal. There's such enthusiasm, and they've got such drive to drive all of our professions forward, and seeing the work they do, really, and you can see the impact of it sort of further down the chain, and it's really, really good to see that sort of thing. And then also they have several conferences where they get a whole variety of people to come and talk to you about their careers, their leadership journeys, what it is they're doing, and just experiencing that is brilliant. And then also the networking and understanding the sort of the greater the interprofessional development. I think I learned more about all of the other professions through the student leadership programme than I did from any of the work that I did through uni. And that's not a failure of the uni at all. It's just that they don't have all the different professions within the university. Whereas on the student leadership programme, you get to speak to everyone, and you get to see a lot. So, and it really gives you the reason to speak to leaders within your hospital as a student. From being on the student leadership programme, they almost give you permission to go to the chief nurse and say, oh, is it okay if I come and shadow you for a day just to see what it's like? And actually people are really receptive to that throughout the sort of hospital chain of command. So they're kind of giving you permission to explore that, even though you're just a student. We should never think of ourselves as just, but you do sometimes worry that you're a little bit not there. So I hope that kind of
brilliant. Thank you, Vicky. So what I'm noticing in what you shared with us then is the value of compassionate leadership and how important that is in the workplace. And I absolutely hear you when you say about, everyone's here because we've got shared values, and patient care is everyone's priority. Actually, we do need to sometimes as leaders take that step back and give that same kind of care and compassion and support to the workforce, because they are the ones that provide the great care. So actually it's that development that will retain the workforce, grow the workforce, ensure we've got the right skills, inspire them, develop them, so that we can continue to strive and drive for excellent care. So brilliant. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I think your piece as well about, we'll come to permission and leadership in a bit. That's a hot topic. We'll pick that one up in a bit. I'm putting that down. I'm putting it on my post-it note, because we'll come back to that one. So, given and following on from what Vicky was just saying then, Luke, I wonder if there are any key moments or, light bulb accident. Oh, we've got company. This is brilliant. Morning. If there's anything that you would like to share that have shaped your own experience as a leader, or gave you that moment where you thought, actually, this is about me and my development, and what you did about that.
Yeah, we've got a little shy girl here who's
Hey?
She's interested, but she's just going to watch.
You're never too young to start your leadership development. This is wonderful role modelling here, Luke.
It's the propaganda that goes on in our house. That's what's going on. So I thought it was really interesting that Vicky mentioned about having, lots of leadership experience kind of outside of the NHS. And that definitely struck a chord with sort of my own little journey. And I think that, I suppose that eureka moment, I was probably about halfway through, my career, so about 5 years ago, when I realised that lots of the skills and the leadership skills that I had from a non sort of traditional background were actually really, really useful, and kind of put me in, a position where people would sort of seek out my opinion, or people would come to me for support or whatever. And I suppose up until that point, I had quite a sort of traditional or maybe hierarchical, that traditional, I'm just a Agenda for Change band 5, or I'm just a band 6, and would introduce myself like that. I would use that language and all that sort of stuff. And I came across this kind of leadership from every level type concept. And it kind of, it's so simplistic, isn't it? But it really did sort of blow my mind that my perspective and how I got into the profession and what I'd done, that wasn't necessarily, within the NHS, was still valid and relevant, and I could sort of bring my whole self into that role. I found that really inspiring and really kind of quite freeing. And it gave me loads and loads of confidence, because it wasn't I suppose until that point, I kind of felt I haven't done that with my dietetic uniform on. I haven't done that within the NHS. Therefore, it kind of doesn't count. That's in a separate box. That's a different part of me. And that idea that you just turn up to work, you bring all those skills. Sometimes you bring a bit of baggage if you've got stuff going on at home, if you've got children that are supposed to be watching Raya and the Last Dragon Hunter, and they're not, you are you, aren't you? And you turn up to work and you can bring all that forward. And then that kind of was a bit of a platform for this kind of authentic style leadership, this compassionate leadership, which you touched on before, Carrie. And again, I just thought, we're so good at giving that to our patients, as Vicky said. We're so good at spotting someone in need. Just shush a minute, chicken. And I think that sometimes we do need to just turn around and think that's all some of our colleagues need sometimes. It's that little bit of arm around the shoulder type stuff. Sometimes they just need a little bit of air in the tyres that day, like we would have done with a patient. So I suppose that's the sort of the route I try to go down. We're just going to remove the child from the room. So just give it to.
Again, you've beautifully demonstrated about how leadership is being yourself and bringing your whole self to work and home. And I've seen worse on the BBC News reporters where children get hiked off with a broom. So very well managed there, Luke. I'm impressed.
She's good as gold. She's good as gold. She's got a fistful of rice cake, so she's happy out.
So Efua, I'm going to come down to you. You know, people often say that you, and again, Luke's picked up on this, you can only lead where others choose to follow. So his realising and recognising that people were looking to him or coming to him for advice or, you know, mentorship, that kind of piece, and that you may have something to offer other people. What, in terms of your kind of practice and experience in leadership, have you got any ideas or tips for people about how to create that experiential leadership opportunity, or if anyone comes to you looking for that kind of advice?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate in my working life as such, because I spent a lot of time at the BBC before I became an ODP. And at the time when I was at the BBC was when it was the Greg Dyke era, and he came in, he was ITV. And back in the day, there was a big thing between ITV versus BBC, and I think that's going to be even tonight with the match going on as well. So him coming in was a bit controversial, and he came in and said, we're going to flatten the hierarchy. Now, being that young, I won't say what age, but being that young, I didn't know what was going on. So I just came in as a temp. I didn't even have ambitions to even work at that area. I was just given a lot of opportunities, and I just said yes, yes, yes to everything. So fast forward, becoming an ODP, I came in with that same headset. And it's interesting that Luke picks up on, it's an interesting point. I just wrote it down about being in when people introduce themselves, they just say, oh, I'm just a HC, I'm just a band 5, I'm just a band 6. And I've never done that. I've always said I never even tell people my band. It's when other people say my band and people around are like, oh, I didn't realize you're a 7, and now I'm going into an 8 role. And then people are like, oh, she's going to be a band 8. And I'm like, no, it's not about the band, it's about the role. Because what people get fixated on is that, and I hear it, and I do a lot of recruitment, and I've got recruitment experience. I hear it a lot when they're coming for, you know, the recruitment advice, and then they say, oh, you know, when I become a band 6, I can do this. And I say, well, actually, what's stopping you from doing it now? What's stopping you from actually starting your journey? Think about, I'm not saying you can change the whole world, but think about a little ripple that you can do sort of now within the role that you're in, and that can help you on the stead. Same goes for students. They all get the same unfortunate lecture as well. So it's about also, when you know that you've got certain skills, it's also about giving those skills up as well and not being selfish, because I've met a lot of leaders that keep a lot of things to themselves, and it's about being open. It's also understanding that you're not going to know everything. I've learned so many things from students that I've actually used the things to also teach others as well. Like I was talking about airways for a long time, and we were talking about the difference between Strider and Wheeze, and then the student came and said, well, actually, if you do it this way, it's really easy. And I thought, oh my God, you know, I'm just going to take that. So I think it's also about checking in with yourself, being kind to yourself as well, because a lot of the time when you're in a certain position, I always say it's a bit like a pyramid. As when you're going up the food chain as such, there's not a lot of you, but you have a bit more exposure, and there isn't that support around. So you do have to go out there and get some critical friends. So it's important to get some honest, really good friends. And it's not easy to find them, but when you find them, it's actually holding on to them as well. And those are the relationships I've had even since I was a student, even till now as well. And it's also checking in with them, asking for advice. You know, Twitter's been an amazing thing, you know, linking in with yourself, Carrie. I met you through Twitter. So, you know, there's so many things that you can go out there to do and link in as well. Also, it's to remember that sometimes when you want to do something at work, the workplace may not be the place for you, but you go and find a platform externally that's going to help you as well. So I do a lot of teaching externally. I do a lot of lecturing, and I've been very fortunate to have done that for nearly 8 years. So a lot of the things that I've done, I have my clinical career, and I'm very good at doing that. But I also have an outlet outside as well. And you also have to push yourself. You have to understand that you have to put yourself out there. You know, I was very fortunate to be offered an opportunity to write in a book, and I struggle with writing. And I was diagnosed very, very late with having a bit of I wouldn't say learning disability, but difficulty. And I've struggled from school and not understood why. And it was actually a student that noticed when I'm taking notes, I'm not taking them properly. So they came and spoke to me in the quiet, and they said, actually, why don't you go and have an assessment? So those are the things that you need to understand as a leader, is that you're not always going to be the person that's at the forefront. You've also got to kind of stand back and let people also come to you as well. Have time for the cup of tea and the pastoral care. I call it that I have a pastoral drawer. at work of love. So the people come in, they come for a snack and sit down. It's not always about work, you know, as Luke also alluded to, and Vicky, you know, we've got all things going on outside of work. You know, I've had a situation recently, and it has an impact on you, and that kind of comes into work as well in the workplace. In terms of the care, you know, we've all been through this horrible, and it's still a horrible situation. We've not had to, we've got this moral injury. So it's also talking to people to say it's okay to feel guilty, because sometimes you're not going to give the full care that you want to give. And you go home thinking, what if? But we're all constrained with time. But it's giving people the space to talk. And it's also not just listening, it's also about hearing people as well. And it's also being a role model. You can't just say these things, you have to role model that behavior. So if you're sitting in a meeting, like for me, I don't particularly like meetings unless they have purpose. They've got to have an agenda. So I kind of challenged somebody very recently to say, well, you invited me to a meeting, what are we going to talk about? We need to kind of have a structure. So that kind of helps in that sense as well. But it's always a learning. You know, we're all in a permanent school. It doesn't stop from when you get your qualification and that's it, and you do all these courses. It's also applying it. But it's also learning from the new generations, like people like Vicky, you know, it's learning from, you know, somebody who's just starting up, because I call them the fresh brains as well. And people say, what do you mean? I said, that's the freshest brain, is speaking to somebody who's just joined the profession. I'm an old brain. I've got habits. I need to speak to the fresh brains to get some more things as well. And they get scared when you go to, I've got international nurses that I'm working with, and I ask them for feedback and they're not used to it, because they're used to you giving feedback, but then when you ask for feedback, they're not used to it. So it takes time, and you have to just be patient as well. But it's also being honest with yourself as well, and celebrating success is the main thing as well.
There's so much in that you have said that resonates, and I can see a lot of head nodding from other people on the panel as well. You're right, leaders are learners. You don't stop learning. Anyone who thinks that they are a leader and they've ticked the box and they don't need to worry anymore is not the kind of leader that I want to follow. You're quite right about being humble, having humility, seeing people, recognizing yourself and your own self-care and what you need, what resilience looks like. That me to we bit in leadership is so important. I want to move on to a topic, because this is an AHP leadership panel, and often I know with leadership sometimes we experience it in our own profession, so we get a good uni-professional opportunity. And I know, like for example, Luke is a professional lead for dietetics. How do you branch out then to, and what are your ways and top tips for people that are wanting to increase their bandwidth of their leadership across professions or across different domains of working? So whether it be innovation, improvement, digital, any ideas or thoughts on that? Yeah, I'll come down to you, Efua. What are your thoughts on that?
So personally, it's about putting yourself out there. You've got to sometimes you've got to send an email to someone. One of the things that I found powerful that I've been involved in the last few years is reverse mentoring. So it's then being, because it's really weird, like you want to access certain managers and you just think they just feel so far away, and you only ever get to see them when it's CQC visits. But it's like doing the reverse mentoring, you actually get to sit down on a one-to-one and explain to them about your journey as well, and some of the challenges on the shop floor. Because sometimes, like for instance, one of the people that I'm in a relationship with at the moment, they're ahead of a very very senior individual. Now they're working outside of the NHS, and they didn't really understand about the shift patterns and how it impacts you in terms of resting time as well, and having like a 30-minute break just doesn't work. So it's accessing, sometimes you just have to cold call people, and it's about sowing seeds. So you may not get a response immediately, so don't feel like they're ignoring you, because the opportunity may not be there at the moment. But when the opportunity arises, it's kind of like that old school way of when you drop your CV, and then when the opportunity is, then somebody gives you a call. It's exactly the same thing. And I always say, utilize Twitter. Twitter's been like an amazing resource, and I think it's so underused, and we don't use it enough as AHPs as well. So we need to also, because a lot of the things that we do are similar across the board. So it's, recently completing the AHP QI program, meeting other other leaders in other areas of the country. I had no idea what was going on across the country. But if I want to introduce something, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. I'm going to use that as a networking. But I didn't know about that until I just said, put it out there. Say, if there's any opportunities, please let me know. So you have to you just got to do it. It's not easy. It's not easy. It's, you know, as sometimes like sitting on a virtual platform is easy because you're in your own space, but being on a face-to-face can be difficult. But I would say, put yourself out there, ask questions. Maybe it's not for you, but just dip your toe as well, and just take every opportunity. I never say no to an opportunity. There's always space. You can always make space for an opportunity as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Vicky, I'll come to you next.
Turn myself off mute. I totally agree with what Efua is saying there. But I think as well, and it's something that I've sort of followed through my whole career, because I joined the army at a time when we were sort of the first batch of women going into the Royal Engineers, so me and sort of 3 of my other colleagues. And I think throughout my whole life, you know, because I started doing engineering, you know, and it was in the time when girls didn't. I just always assumed I could do it. And I think a lot of people now, you know, instead of going, oh, I can't do that, I'm an AHP, or I can't do that because I'm an ADP, or, you know, actually don't assume that. Just assume that you can do it. You know, look at the job description and look at all the positive things you do bring to it, other than a registered nurse. You know, you're not a registered nurse, but you are a registered AHP. Yeah, and actually all of the other skills you have in masses. And I think something that I see as well, and I think it comes more from the nursing side. In the nursing side, they sort of have their strict order of how you work up through your career, and you do, and you know, to talk about bands, because that's kind of what they talk, you know, it's a band 5 job, then you must do a band 6 job for a while. Is actually, do you know what, you might be a band 7, and there might be a band 8D job going, but actually you've got all of the qualifications for it. You've got stuff that you've done outside of the NHS that actually add to that. And I think people think that they can't go for something that isn't the next step on the ladder. Actually, there's nothing wrong with missing out a few rungs on the ladder. And I think a big thing is just assume you can instead of assuming you can't. And that goes with, you know, it doesn't matter if you're talking what your qualification is or what your gender is, or, you know, any other thing that you think is a barrier for you doing something. It's just assume you can, and everyone else will believe you can too.
So what I love about what you've said there is it's about skills and strengths, and owning your strengths, and let that be your driver to determine where you go next on your leadership journey. And I totally agree with you. One of my mottos is don't work to the top of your band, work to the top of your skill set, because that doesn't have limits. And don't let your band be your limiting factor in that space. Brilliant. Thank you, Vicky. Luke, anything else from you on that one that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think like just touching on like what both of the guys have just said then, I think like that on that theme of skills over roles, it's have a think about, you know, as I said, my own lack of maturity or the environment I was in or whatever it was. I was quite far into my career really when someone actually asked me the question. So like, what are we doing here? You know, what are you actually wanting to get out of this? And as soon as I started to really sort of think about that question, I mean, I had no answer to it. I was like, I don't know. I was just going to be a band 5 for a bit, then be a band 6 for a bit, and then be a band 7 for a bit, and then, yeah, you know, job done. And I think when I started to think about that question and give it some thought and give it the respect that it needs, that allows you to then spot opportunities that you're curious about. You know, spot, as Efua said, like, you know, if an opportunity comes along, then if it doesn't go well, you're still going to learn something about yourself from that experience. You do have to be brave. You know, you do have to, you know, like grasp it with both hands and just see how it plays out for you. Sometimes, obviously, you know, looking for these like secondments that are coming up, you know, if you don't want to jump ship out of your profession in a permanent basis, you know, a 6, 12, 18 months secondment can just, it can do wonders for you, whether that's showing you a door that you want to keep kind of exploring, or kind of showing you something that you thought you were into and actually it's not for you. And I think finally, like, kind of on that point, you don't develop and you don't get better sitting in the comfort zone, doing the same old things that you're doing. You know, if you're always doing that rhythm and that routine, then you're always going to get the same output for yourself. So you've got to stress yourself. You've got to be a little bit uncomfortable, you know. Even getting asked to do this, Carrie said, "Do you want to do it?" I was absolutely terrified. Do you know what I mean? Like, what do I know? You know, but you got to do it. You know what I mean? You got to put yourself out there. Same for exactly what Vicky said. You know, I was a band 6 and the professional lead job came out, and it was a colleague actually who said, "You'd be pretty good at that, you know." And I was like, you know, again, still trying to break out of that. Well, I'm a 6, so that's not my next move. My next move is such and such. I had a little think about it and thought, actually, do you know what? When I read this job description, I could probably give that a good go. And obviously said the right stuff at the interview, and you know, and here I am 2 years later. So you know, I completely like have lived that sort of skills over role sort of thing, and it is uncomfortable. You know, it's not great. You know, at times you do doubt yourself. You do have that, you know, imposter syndrome lurks around every corner. But, you know, as a close colleague and friend said, you just got to get over yourself, you know.
Absolutely. And so I'm loving the, you know, this is about challenge. Actually, discomfort in this sense is a good thing. That shows that you're learning, you're growing, and you're putting yourself in a position where you will benefit and develop from it. The point around disruption, actually, you've all mentioned things around don't sit comfortably and do your routines and the way you do things. Sometimes you need to disrupt your behaviors, your patterns, your learned responses to situations, and give a different response just to see what it feels like to do a different response and try something. So, and if you're feeling wobbly and inside you're thinking, oh God, I don't think I can do it, your answer should be, yes, I'm going to do it. Because that's where you get yourself right in the challenge zone to take something on. Brilliant. We are nearly at the end of our session. I would like to know if there is any final thoughts, top tips or tools around leadership development that you would like to share. So I'm going to come to you first, Vicky.
Always first. I think it's just put yourself out there and go for it. You know, I mean, that is the biggest thing, you know, just what's the next step? What am I going to do next? What can I do next? And I think a big thing for me as well is when you're sort of lacking in that inspiration and you don't know where you're going to go. Actually, I find things like this, you know, conferences, speaking to other people that have that are doing something, it gives you that little inspiration buzz that you need to keep going. And I think advocating for each other, you know, find yourself somebody, and be they at the top of the chain or at the bottom of the chain, everyone always needs a bit of a "you're doing brilliant," you know. And I find this really impressive about you, you know. And don't be afraid to tell people that, you know, help other people out, and they will return it in spades, I'm sure.
Love that. Appreciation. See it, say it, write it, tell people. It motivates people to keep trying, doesn't it? Lovely. Efua, we'll come to you next. Any top tips from you?
What I would say is, like, take the banding out of your language. Take it out completely. I personally just don't particularly like it, and I think it actually it puts people on a back foot. So they and as Luke alluded to, you know, I was going to be a band 5 for this long, band 6, but it doesn't matter. You know, take what also Vicky said. So what I would say is also it's important to do, and it's something that somebody told me, go off and write all the skills that you've got, because you'd be surprised about the skills that you have that you don't realize you have as well. And in terms of, like, when you look at jobs, don't be afraid to have an informal chat with somebody to say, well, actually, I've read the job spec. You've said he's a registered nurse, but actually, I'm not a registered nurse. I'm a registered AHP. Can I apply for the job? And and that's what I did in the job that I'm going to now, because it did say registered nurse on it. And it was actually a very, very critical friend that said to me, you know what, Effie, you need to just go, and this is something that you need to sort of do because you're doing it already. So why don't you try it out? It's going to be a secondment. So I wasn't sure. So I just had the conversation and thought, okay, you know what, I'll just go for it and see. But actually doing that skill sort of exercise, I do have the skills to actually do the role. So it's coming out of, and it is going to come out of my comfort zone, because it's not going to be in theatres anymore. So I've trained in theatre. So it's a bit like, oh my God, I'm stepping out completely. and not just dipping the toe. So you have to just try to do it. Also, think about all the things that you would like to do. So if there's somebody that you role model, like you see like there's a role model or somebody that you're interested in, doesn't necessarily have to be in your same discipline. That's the beauty of AHPs. When you're going around the circuit, you get to meet so many different professions. And meeting the professions when I was working on the ward, it got me thinking, oh, I wonder if I should have been a physio, or maybe I should have been a dietitian, or maybe I should have done speech and language. So you get to sort of start thinking about all these different things as well. Also, look at mentoring others. There's lots of things out there to mentor young people that want to come into healthcare. And you'd be surprised that a lot of the young people that I've mentored that want to come into healthcare, like this is between like 14 and 19 and even beyond, none of them have said they want to be a nurse. They've all chosen AHP careers. So there are people out there that really want to be an AHP. And if you are one, it's going out there to talk about it as well. Be an NHS ambassador. Just keep talking about your profession, bigging it up as well, because that's a lot of it is word of mouth that people actually find out about the careers that we're in as well. And that's just the nature of being an AHP as well. So put yourself out there, do your skill set, get out your comfort zone. Don't talk about banding, talk about your skills.
Lovely, thank you. And Luke, we will come to you.
I don't like going last because it's like, it's already been said. Efua is so like articulate with it. But what I would echo what they've said, and I would, especially around the banding, the concept of like leadership from every level. You don't necessarily have to be part of the 150 leaders program, like Vicky. You don't have to be moving into an 8 role, like Efua. You don't have to be in an actual job title to demonstrate leadership. And I think actually this is something that myself and another professional lead, we just delivered a kind of leadership session for our student AHPs in our system to kind of like really, really like quite bluntly drive that point home. When you look at the qualities of a leader, are you authentic? Are you honest? Do you respect your colleagues? Are you trying to influence some change? Do you want to collaborate across the system? Do you want to provide critical challenge to what's already there? You don't need a certain amount of pay to do some of those things. Obviously, you have to be cognizant of your sphere of influence, but even if it's only within your team of 4 or whatever, they're leadership qualities. So have a think about what skills you do have. I thought that was a really great tip from Efua to like go away and write down some of your strengths. And we then developed a leadership log for students or kind of preceptees or slightly junior members of staff, or even staff that have been working for a while that just are looking for something different, to start writing down some of the things that they're doing that exhibit leadership. And I completely agree again with Efua around the banding. I think that traditional hierarchical thinking, it leaves us completely unable to articulate our leadership actions, fully to other people when we sort of advocate for a colleague who's in a difficult situation, when we provide like that sort of colloquial pastoral care. That's leadership in action. But because of the way that we're sort of taught to think sometimes about being a 5 does this, being a 6 does this, you kind of don't see that as being a leader. So I think having that slight introspection about yourself kind of shows you where your strengths are, but also where your weak spots are. Again, just focusing on your strengths all the time, you're not going to round yourself out. You're not going to get any better. That comes back to that, you grow when you're feeling uncomfortable. It's not nice, but you're going to learn something about yourself from it. So you can start that now. You can start that as a student. You don't have to wait. You can start thinking about the things that you're doing on placement, learning on placement, and how they link to leadership and how that might fit in with the journey that you want to take through the profession.
Brilliant. Perfect round off from you, Luke. Thank you. Your leadership journey starts when you want it to, and it can start today. This could be the session where you make that decision and you start to write down your strengths. You start to write down and reflect where you can see you're taking leadership in the tasks and the way you work every day, whether that be in work, whether that be in roles you have outside of work, in charities, with local community groups, on school, governors, councils, trustees, whatever it is. There's leadership everywhere. It doesn't have to be just in your clinical setting that you look for it. Thank you, everybody, for this morning, for your time, your thoughts, your energy. I've really enjoyed this session. We could talk all day about leadership. If you are interested and you've been inspired this morning, please head over to the virtual hub. We've got On the Frontline AHPs, a series of podcasts there that feature, Luke's featured in there from having done a podcast, and others. So there's a whole host of inspirational podcasts that you can go and check out in the AHP virtual booth. So this session is going to round off here. We will be back shortly, and I'm going to hand over back to the event team. Thank you, everybody.